can we get a roll call, please?
Dr. Beebe?
Present.
Dr. Beebe is present. Dr. Bophy? Just stepped out. Okay. Ms. Bradford?
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Mr. Guillot?
Present.
Mr. Guillot is present. Ms. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Harris is present. Ms. Hill?
Present.
Ms. Hill is present. Dr. Moranti?
Present.
Dr. Moranti is present. Ms. Orange Jones?
Present.
Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Romer?
Here.
Mr. Romer is present. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith is present. You have a quorum.
Okay, first item.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding item 3.1.
We get a motion, Ms. Bradford, second by Mr. Romer. Thank you. Do we have any objections to the motion? We have a speaker on this. This includes item 3.1, I believe. Okay. Ms. Barrios?
Oh, I do have some concerns. I mean, I have a comment.
Okay. Ms. Beebe and Ms. Barrios, if you could come down if you're interested in speaking.
Okay, well, it's the consideration of the policy regarding RSD management, but I don't know that there was anything included. Is this going to be brought back at a certain time, or?
We deferred an item that we had told you we would be discussing at a later meeting regarding the return policy. In the times that that whole process took place, the New Orleans Parish School Board Superintendent came on board, and we're working with him on a whole slate of policies. We'd like to have further engagement with him prior to finalizing this report.
Okay, well, with that said, and I don't know if it's relating to this, but I see the connection with the closure of Longap Academy, and there has been a discussion about the assets, if you will, or those things that, well, I think there's an outstanding debt for that charter operator, and so I would just kind of like to have an update regarding their the charter operator's responsibility. Do we just write them off, or they write it off and we forgive them, or
the property purchased with state dollars becomes the property of the state. That's in the law in the event of a charter school closure. The board of the school that is maintaining an operating debt right now, deficit, is an ongoing nonprofit entity. They shoulder that debt themselves and are responsible for disposing of it themselves.
So they don't owe us per se. They owe their vendors
creditors,
or those entities that they secured those resources. They have that obligation to
That's
them.
correct.
So do we have a policy? I mean, I understand what you're saying. They're responsible, but then, I mean, I read an article where we're dispersing those resources. So if it's their responsibility, do we have ownership, and do we have the right to disperse of those resources?
We have the right under the law to continue to use assets, say desks, computers, that were purchased with state funds for educating kids in Orleans Parish. That's how they will be used. That's a different thing, however, from the debt that nonprofit maintains in any future fiscal year, which is solely their obligation to dispose of.
So in essence, you're saying that we own because the desk and those things were purchased with state dollars, that we have the jurisdiction, if you will, to dispose of.
Correct. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's right.
Okay, Ms. Barrios?
Okay, and this is item 2.1, right?
This is 3.1.
Okay, I wanted to speak to 2.1. I didn't know it was out of
We'll
order,
have
so-
We'll have 2.1 in just a minute,
Okay.
and if you could stay, it'll come quick.
She has a card for 3.1 as well.
Right. That's why she's doing 3.1.
No comment on 3.1. I'll pass on.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have any other questions from BESE members? Hearing none, do we have any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
Your first item is on page 1. Item 2.1, consideration of a report on types 2, 4, and 5 charter contracts and requests for amendments. The department recommendation is to approve the change to the current physical location to expand the enrollment capacity and to add an additional service site as outlined in the updated executive recommendation.
So moved.
Okay. Ms. Bradford, second by Mr. Romer. Thank you. Do we have any questions from BESE members?
I could just provide a brief bit of background.
I don't think we need it.
Fair enough.
Any questions? Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Next item.
This concludes your agenda.
Thank you.
He's all hyped up on that.
I'm sorry. I was trying to get these guys to lunch. Ms. Barrios, please.
Okay, and you may want Mr. White to give his background information when I'm finished with this, but Lee Barrios, retired teacher.
Let's hear from Ms. Barrios, please.
So, I appreciate that students have the opportunity that are low performing for whatever reason, have the opportunity to get special services, and I understand that's what Jefferson Chamber is for. However, I think that their status was misrepresented in this presentation, and my feeling is that before the population is increased, and certainly before another school is opened, that that this body have higher expectations for them. It says that JFCA earned a D letter grade in 2014. They actually earned an F, and they are in a state of declining. They got a lower score this year than they did last year for their F, which they also received last year. So I would ask you to look at that. The grad rate is 30%. And so I ask you to consider that before you open more services for these kids, before you improve the services that you're able to offer them. Thank you.
Okay.
I would like the superintendent to speak to the item.
Mr. Superintendent?
Well, before someone came up to criticize the school, I wanted just to note that the school is an alternative school. It's one of the higher performing alternative schools in the state. It takes students who are overage undercredited, coming out of incarcerated settings, and have been expelled from the traditional school system. That's why you have the numbers in front of you, and we actually consider it a necessary school and in its context making good progress with kids. So opening up a location on the West Bank, which has a more challenged student population, makes some sense.
And I would add that the stats that were cited earlier were for a different charter school that is owned by the same entity, and a younger, newer charter school. The older charter school, in fact, got the D grade, not the F grade, and it's the one that's being expanded. And I would also like to note, as you see in the handout, that the name of this chartering organization is anticipated to change so as to remove the chamber name, because the parties involved believe that this group has graduated and can stand better on its own. So with that in mind, we have any objections to the motion from BESE members? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Next item.
This concludes your agenda.
Educator Effectiveness Committee will convene at 1:30.